By the time I am finished with this speech, one more American will have been added to the National Transplant Waiting List awaiting an organ donation. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, the number of Americans on this wait list stands at a staggering 119,000 and counting. Every single day, 22 Americans die waiting for an organ donation. The United States has a serious organ shortage problem, which is dire, because you never know when you or someone you love will be in need of an organ. We must increase the supply by incentivizing organ donation. Organ procurement agencies in the United States should award organ donors a voucher in exchange for their organ donation. Today, we will examine the current policies surrounding organ donation in the United States. Next, the problems with our current transplant policy. Then we will uncover a solution to this pressing issue before finally reviewing the counter-arguments to incentivize organ donation. There are two pieces of legislation surrounding organ donation in the United States. The first is the National Organ Transplant Act, or NOTA. NOTA authorized the Department of Health and Human Services to issue grants to initiate organ procurement agencies. Organ procurement agencies are organizations that collect and distribute human organs to needy patients. But above all, NOTA outlawed the sale of human organs. Under NOTA, it is illegal for an organ procurement agency to pay an organ donor for his or her organ donation. However, it is perfectly legal for the doctors, hospital, and staff involved in a transplant to get paid. In our current system, organ donors, both living and cadaveric, have their organs harvested at a transplant center. The organ procurement agency running that transplant center then sells the organ to the hospital. The patient then pays the doctor and the hospital for the treatment and the organ. Everybody wins except the donor. NOTA was intended to boost organ donation, but in this regard, NOTA has failed. The second piece of legislation is the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, or UAGA. The UAGA establishes that the United States is not a consent-assumed country, meaning that when a citizen dies, it is not assumed that his or her organs are up for donation. Rather, a citizen must have made expressed authorization during his or her lifetime, such as indicating so on a driver's license, or registering for an organ donor card. According to the United States Health Department, 95% of American adults approve of the idea of organ donation, but only 48% are registered organ donors. Altruism is currently the only reason why any American would consider making an organ donation, living or cadaveric. There is currently no other incentive. And this harms the United States in three main ways. The first is the immeasurable and undue suffering of the citizens on the wait list. For many Americans, health and quality of life deteriorates as they wait and wait for an organ. And for the vast majority of the citizens on the wait list, they are waiting in vain. The second harm is that money is wasted on the treatment of patients who would otherwise be healthy if only they had access to an organ. For example, a publication from the Hofstra Law Review highlights that Medicare is required to pay for dialysis treatment of patients with end-level kidney failure. According to the National Kidney Foundation, end-level kidney failure requires dialysis treatment from onset until the time of death, a time span that is approximately 10 years. Dialysis treatment costs Medicaid $55,000 per year per patient. Now, a kidney transplant, which is a far less costly operation than prolonged dialysis treatment, would not only eliminate the suffering, but it would also eliminate the cost. The third harm is that organ donors are not properly compensated for their sacrifice. Consider the story of Suzanne Sutton, a 28-year-old woman who decided to take her own life. Now, upon death, Susan's mother gave the doctors permission to donate her heart, liver, corneas, skin, and bones. Susan's heart and liver gave life. Her corneas gave sight. Her skin and bones healed wound, burn, and deformity patients, but Susan, was buried in an unmarked grave because her family did not have the means to afford a headstone. Now, the value of the organs that she donated could not even afford her the dignity of a proper burial. Clearly, we need reform. The solution is for organ procurement agencies in the United States to award a voucher to organ donors in exchange for their donation. Or, in the case of cadaver donations, the voucher should be awarded to the next of kin. This voucher should be limited exclusively to housing, tuition, contribution to a charity of choice, or funeral arrangements. This voucher system is effective for two main reasons. First, the United States already has the infrastructure to carry out this plan. Donors would still go to transplant centers to have their organs harvested. Hospitals would still carry out all transplant procedures, and the compatible match database would still match organs to needy patients. The only thing that changes is that the organ procurement agencies have to pay the donors a voucher before they can sell their organ to the hospital. The second reason that this plan is effective is that it boosts motivation. Incentivized organ donations reaches a target population that otherwise would not have considered donating. This increased amount of organs would close the organ gap, which decreases death and suffering of Americans and also saves taxpayer dollars. Not only is this solution effective, it's also solvent. Consider the fact that blood, egg, and sperm donation are all generously remunerated in the United States. And according to the Washington Post, there is no shortage of these bodily gifts. We owe it to the citizens on the wait list to start treating internal organs the same way we treat these other life givers and life savers. But there are still some naysayers. Let's cover the three main counter-arguments against incentivized organ donation. The first is that the incentives deter altruistic donors, thus driving donation rates down. But this simply isn't true, because the voucher system differs from exchanging an organ for a lump sum of cash. Rather, organ donors earn the opportunity to compound their goodwill with a donation to charity, housing, tuition, or funeral arrangements. It is not the same thing as selling your organ. Sally Sadel, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, said in an interview with the Washington Post that altruism is a great story, but it's not doing enough to save lives. She continues in saying that that incentivized organ donation doesn't cheapen the gift. Rather, it mobilizes motivation for more people to donate their organs. The second counter-argument is that the price of organs would increase and the burden of cost would be shifted to patients. But actually, the opposite happens. According to a CNN article titled, "Should People Be Allowed to Sell Their Organs?" market factors influence the price of the organ. The more people donate their organs, the more organs there are on the market, which drives the price of organs down. The value of the voucher would be proportional to the value of the organ on the market. The third counter-argument is that the poor would be exploited. Some argue that poor people would be so desperate for money that they would lop off their body parts and sell them. But this claim is far from the truth. Consider the fact that Scholarly Commons, a research publication, reports that even though egg donation is remunerated for thousands of dollars, the majority of egg donors in the United States are not poor women. But more than this, the idea that a segment of our population should be barred from being rewarded for a voluntary decision denies them autonomy over their own bodies. Consider a system in which you had to meet a minimum income requirement to be eligible for a voucher in exchange for your organ donation. Such a system would be deemed unfair to poor people. It is of the utmost importance that all Americans are eligible for a voucher in exchange for their organ donation. It is for the betterment of the health of our society. So today, we've examined the current policies surrounding organ donation, some of the problems with our current system, a way to solve these problems, and refuted the counter-arguments. Organ donors give the gift of life to the most health-compromised Americans, and it's time we stopped giving them nothing in return.